Welcome to the COP26 Nature Newsroom here in Glasgow. We have the pleasure of welcoming two special guests today, Akanksha Khatri, who is the head of the Nature Action Agenda at the World Economic Forum, and also Marco Lambertini, the Director General of the WWF International. So first question for you, Akanksha. Why do you think it's really important to value nature? I know that the WEF has done this report showing that half of the GDP is actually depending on nature. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure. First of all, just thanks for having me, Elise, and also for this very important conversation. I think COP26 this time just does not feel like a climate COP, but also climate and nature COP. And one of the pieces that a session that I was watching was with Professor Partha Dasgupta, who authored The Economics of Biodiversity, which was commissioned by the UK Treasury, where he talks about the fact that for all these decades, in our economic activity, we have only been measuring the financial capital, the human capital, and the produced capital, but we haven't actually measured natural capital, which is what underpins all the activities that we do. And COVID has made us realize now more than ever that literally everything which we can call the well-being and quality of our lives is actually dependent on nature and ecosystem services. So if we do not measure these things, we always just take them for granted, and we assume that we live on a planet with infinite resources, which could not be farther from the truth. So we have to learn to measure and value natural capital so that we can adjust our economic and societal activities to live within planetary boundaries.
And you, Marco, you've been leading many conservation projects around the world. Why is it so important to value nature? And also, how do you take that as part of decision making here in Glasgow, but also for national government?
Well, as Akanksha said, I think there is a new eco-awakening about the true value of nature as well as to the true cost of nature loss. Something that we haven't really accounted for until extremely recently. And a number of reports that you mentioned in your introduction, Elise, and Akanksha mentioned as well, are making it super clear that the value of nature goes far beyond what we actually are currently measuring, but it is about services which are fundamental to support our economy, our well-being, our health, the stability of our society. So we got to begin to recognize those values and the cost of losing them, because otherwise we will continue to treat nature as an expendable commodity rather as a capital to manage wisely and sustainably. And it's not just about the cost, as I mentioned, it's about the value and the opportunities as well. The WEF, the World Economic Forum that Akanksha works for, they did a wonderful report looking at the opportunities in terms of added economic value as well as job creation of investing in nature-positive transitions of key sectors, from energy to land use, agriculture, fishing in the ocean, infrastructure, and that totaled to an extraordinary 10 trillion of added economic value over 10 years and over 400 million new jobs, because we know that many of these transitions actually will generate more jobs than the business as usual. Classic example is if you compare fossil fuel industry versus renewable. Many more jobs,
more
employed in the renewable energy.
Yeah. And Akanksha, how do you see the role of the private sector in this nature-positive recovery that Marco is describing now?
So yeah, I think I'll pick up on what Marco started. Is if we look at this report that Marco was referring to, it was entitled The Future of Nature and Business, because we collectively believe that there is no business as usual scenario where we can continue an extractive relationship with nature, with planet Earth. And businesses are realizing it more and more. I think a couple of examples which I can give to the audiences watching this session is, first of all, is the food sector. Which is, of course, has also been covered very strongly in COP26, and today is responsible for almost a third of the greenhouse gas emissions and a huge chunk of nature loss as well. And businesses which are operating in the commodity supply chain, particularly in the food commodities, recognize that we are looking at degraded soil and earth. So just as in terms of statistics, more than half of the agricultural land today is degraded. And if we continue on a business as usual pathway, that would mean that we will not have any food security. And that would mean that we are looking at almost like 13% of the rise in food cost by 2030. So again, I don't think that there's a way for business as usual, and corporates and public sector have to work hand in hand on this front.
Good point, Akanksha. And Marco, we've been hearing the youth leaders here in Glasgow saying we need to change the system, not the climate. In your view, because if we continue with business as usual with the same system, we are continue to give the same economic incentives for companies to destroy the planet, to destroy climate and nature. So in your view, is it possible to go beyond GDP growth and to really look at more well-being for people and nature? Is this systemic transformation possible today?
Well, I think it is possible. It's a question of wanting to do it, and as we said in the answer to your first question, the current GDP completely ignores the values that are associated to societal and human well-being. And one of those values, of course, is related to the health of our natural systems that provides so many services that make us feel good, well, healthy, and then contribute to our economy. Take water, for example. Water is really not valued as it should be. Water is a fundamental global common, if you like, that is supporting so many sectors of our economy, from the most obvious one like agriculture to also a lot of the industrial sectors that need access to water to produce their goods. So definitely we need to move beyond the current definition of GDP. But we did an exercise a few years ago looking at using the same methodology of the GDP of today, and so looking at goods and services provided by the ocean specifically, and even just by applying the same methodology, we calculated with BCG, we calculated that the ocean would be worth $2.5 trillion per year of goods and services. That would put it still today, I think, about the 7th economy in the world. So,
okay.
Even applying the current
GDP.
Yes.
And valuing oceans as well. We sometimes forget about oceans and water as being part of the solutions for climate, people, and nature. As we need to wrap up, I would like to ask both of you now, what would be your top messages to the leaders who are here in Glasgow? We're hearing that ministers and negotiators are working around the clock. We're also hearing that nature-based solutions are part of the final package in terms of the decisions that will be taken here in Glasgow. What are your messages to them now in this final stretch? Maybe Akanksha first and then Marco.
Sure. So first of all, I do want to say that we are all in it together. So while we do speak of it with national boundaries and national interest, at the end of the day, what happens in one part of the world affects everybody, some more than the others. And then the second is I'm a strong believer of shared but differentiated responsibility, which is that we need to recognize that there are countries and players who are at a very different spectrum of equality. So how do we bring them along is super critical. And lastly, the point is when we are looking at a 1.5 degree pathway, we need to give equal amount of value to nature-based solutions and land transition, as we have done for decarbonization and energy transition.
So we must decarbonize and invest in nature. We must do both.
Absolutely.
And work
Yes.
as one team for one planet. And you, Marco, your final word, final message to the decision makers?
I think it is also about integration. It's about integration of the key agendas and challenges and opportunities of today: fight climate change, preserve nature and biodiversity and healthy ecosystems, and address the issue of inequality across the world. And so integrate these three. We need to tick the three boxes almost in everything we do, we plan, we commit to. And I think we've seen some positive, encouraging signs at COP26 of that willingness to begin to integrate finally.
Thank you, Marco. So working for climate, people, and nature together, and let's hope we are going towards a nature-positive future here in Glasgow and beyond Glasgow. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you.